Welcome to She's the Boss, the show that is all about female founders and women doing extraordinary things in business. I really hope you enjoy it, and if you do, we would love you to subscribe to the YouTube channel and also click on notifications when you want to know about new shows, because we're going to have a couple of shows coming out a week. But let me get to the point of this fantastic interview, which I'm very excited to be doing with somebody who I admire enormously, Dr. Polly McGee. Now, let me tell you a little bit about Polly, and then we will jump into this conversation. She is the director of Pilot Light Consulting. She is a board member, she's an author, she's a speaker, she's a strategist. She was the co-founder of Startup Tasmania, it still is, and an ABC content maker, as in she does a lot of work for the ABC and has over many years. And I know her very well because she's also known in Tasmania as Dr. Digital and runs a lot of podcasts. But this is only the tip of the iceberg with Polly. So I want you all to welcome Dr. Polly McGee. Hi, Polly.
Hi, Jules. Thank you so much for having me on She's the Boss. And I'm sorry if all of those doings have just exhausted people. Feel free to take a deep breath and have a lie down.
Oh my God, you are so energizing. No one's going to be able to have a lie down. So let's start with, tell me a little bit about what you're actually doing now. And then I want us to have a little conversation about what we think is going on in the world, because I love having those conversations with you.
And I'm all about the big conversations, Jules. I
You
don't
are.
do the small talks. So what I'm doing now is I believe, in fact, I know for a fact that you interviewed my beautiful sister and bestie and co-owner of Pilot Light very recently, Zoe Coyle. So Zoe and I run Pilot Light together, which is amazing. And Pilot Light it's really a leadership facilitation business, but basically we go into rooms with people and we work with them and watch their transformations happen, whether it's in a leadership context or a values context. So that's been beautiful, and COVID hasn't kept us down. And as you said, I'm Dr. Digital, so I do a lot of work in Tasmania with Tasmanian businesses and help them understand the digital landscape. And then I run my own consultancy and I work one-on-one as a coach. I work with groups. I do a lot of speaking. So my dance card's it's diverse and full.
Oh, you are so clever. I just love everything that you do. All right, so now we've got all the niceties out of the way, and because so for anyone who's listening, if you want to know more about Polly's entrepreneur journey, we have a great podcast interview with her that is up on She's the Boss Chats. So that outside the way, let's talk about what is going on in the world right now, particularly as a result of COVID. What do you think's happening out there, Polly?
I'm probably more pumped and excited than I've ever been about what's happening in the world, because, I'm a human that loves to be in chaos. I mean, it's why I love the startup environment so much. I love quick moving things. I love change. I love developing big ideas and getting them out into the world. And I think what many of us have learned for the first time is that things can change really, really quickly. And when they do, we can start to see the opportunity in those changes. And for many of us, certainly the clients that I work with, and I know that this is a story many of your people tell you too, Jules, that they really want to do stuff, but then they've got the mortgage and they've got the job and they've got the school fees, and there's stuff that really feels like it weighs us down, it holds us in place. And I think what COVID did was come along and just pull the rug out from everybody. And suddenly people were like, well, what am I going to do now? And they had time, they had space, they had the ability to say, in a world where values are important to me, how would I do things differently? And I'm seeing a lot of people really rising up now and saying, actually, this has been the sort of disjuncture that I needed to be able to get in and make those changes happen. I feel like there is an energetic shift that's going on right now, which is more powerful than it's ever been. And it's just something that I am fully breathing deeply into and running with, Jules.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I know that for some people this has been devastating, but it is actually a huge opportunity, as I 100% agree with you. And I think from my own perception, and I've been talking about this a bit, I sort of feel like because of COVID, and as you say, the rug being pulled out from underneath everyone, and we've all talked about how it sort of put pause on the world, basically, because everyone stopped at the same time. We were all in the same boat. But I think the other thing that I'm really noticing is just things that have been in place for centuries are breaking down. Things are breaking. We're watching the disruption and the dismantling, I think, of mainstream media. We're watching what's happening in America, which used to be, you know, the be-all and end-all of everything. And to me, I just feel like it's imploding. You know, we're watching what's been happening with the planet. We know everybody's been wanting to try and be kind to the environment. And here was an opportunity where suddenly all the manufacturing stopped. All of the pollutants going into the atmosphere suddenly stopped. And this is a huge opportunity for us to say, when we restart, how about we don't do it the way we've been doing it? What do you think of that?
I think a lot about that. And I want to just unpack a couple of things. And firstly, I want to also really acknowledge that there is suffering and that people are in situations which feel terribly frightening and really upsetting. There's a lot of grief. And I don't negate that for a second in any of the things that I'm about to say, because that's real. What I want to do, Jules, is a couple of things. I want to suggest a reframe as well of the way we view that feeling. And the reality is all of us suffer all the time. It is the fundamental human condition. But we suffer in binary. So we're like, this is really bad. This is really good. I just want the good. I don't want the bad. What we need to be able to do is stop working out of the binary. And I think we're being really invited to change the way we see the world. So rather than going, oh no, I've lost my job, or oh no, I'm home, or oh no, I'm this, it's what is this if it isn't a good or a bad? What if this is, if it's just curious, if it's just an opportunity?
Different. It's different.
To not put a feeling or a label on it that makes it good or bad. And I think in that way we can be much more present to what's actually happening in a more macro sense. We're being really invited to be still and to do our inner work. Now, the work I do with clients, people come to me and they'll be like, oh, help me with my business. And, you know, in half an hour, we're really digging deep into what's actually happening for them, who they are, what their family origin stories are, where are they brave, where are they terrified. That's all of us. We really need to be able to work with getting ourselves into a place of vulnerability and courage to do this work. But the other great thing, Jules, is that we've lived in a world that has been driven by logic and reason and
very left brain. Yes, I agree.
The left brain, but also all of the tools of the patriarchy and all the tools of the hegemony. So we've worked in these very constricting structures for women. We don't fit in those structures.
No, as we know.
They're not built for us in any way, shape or form, and our voices are silenced in them. So when you talk about media breaking down, you know, I feel that's so exciting because
so do I
see another like 18-year-old that's been airbrushed who's then, you know, hating their life because they're never going to be enough. I want to see real stories of real women, and I want to see the sisterhood really empowering themselves. So when we take away the logic, the reason, the rational way of seeing the world, and everything's thrown into chaos, we operate in chaos, and chaos asks for us to not have a linear beginning and an end. It asks for us to be able to see that there are infinite, truly infinite possibilities, and we just have to kind of reach out and choose which one we want to pursue and then find the metal to do it.
Yes, absolutely. And I don't know whether you saw this, Polly, and I probably should have thought about this before we have our interview. But last week there was some research that came out about the Australian media. Did you see it?
I did not.
Okay, so this will give you an idea about it. It's been conducted over 3 years. The headline in Mumbrella, which is the magazine newspaper for the media, was pale, stale male. I think that kind of says it all. What the research showed, and this is just talking about the media side of things, was that 100% of the executives and boards of free-to-air television are men. Not only are they men, they're white Anglo-Saxon men who are making those decisions. Now, I have no surprise at that stat at all. Have you? I mean, I just feel like we haven't had anything there in television land for intelligent women that maybe aren't interested in a TV channel or a TV show that is about cooking, cleaning, or, you know, us on the sidelines. I want to see things where women are in power and they're in control. And there are so many women that are being incredibly successful at the moment.
Yeah, that's right. And that was a really interesting study. I did see it and I just hadn't clocked what it was called. But one of the interesting things with that too is, I mean, the diversity numbers were skewed enormously by SBS. So really it's about 4% if you take SBS out of the percentages of diversity we see. And, we hear so often, if we can't see it, we can't be it. And I believe there is a lot of truth in that. And I want to see Indigenous faces. I want to see
Yes, so do I.
people with different abilities. I want
yes.
to see faces of women from all ages, from all demographics, from all countries, and men. I want to see what I see when I go out the door. I don't want to see privilege and whiteness and authority, because I feel like I've been seeing that my whole life and I'm pretty sick of it.
I couldn't agree with you more, and it's interesting in the She's the Boss group and the women that I'm sort of associating with through a lot of the time through these interviews and things. One of the things that we've been talking about is not only the sort of the sexism that has been out there in the media, but in bigger business land, which I guess you would call more of a macro sense, the ageism that's been going on. The woo-woo people are all saying as well, the patriarchy have had 600 years or whatever it is of dominance, and now all the world energies are changing and the feminine is rising. I can feel that. I don't think I'm alone too. I've been talking to a lot of women, and it's like something's shifted as a result of this.
What happened, Jules? And I mean, I'm one of the woo-woo people. I fully subscribe to that world.
So tell us what it is then, because I said it in a very sort of top-line way. What's going on?
If you're talking sort of hardcore energetic speak, we're talking about an ascension from the third dimension to the fifth dimension. And we're in the fourth dimension now. So basically all that means is that we're moving out of a world which has formerly been really, really physical and really, it's a heavy dimension, into a dimension which is heart-based. We're working from an energy of heart. So it's not like we're all just going to be like sucked up into the spaceship.
But as soon as you say heart, it makes me think women have a place there, because they don't have a place in a world of numbers and things unless they're very unusual.
What that means energetically, though, is that we are going to be seeing heart-centered leadership, heart-driven business.
Yes.
And energy of the heart. So it's not the energy of the brain. The brain energy is just, we think that our brains are really open and really they're the machines that make everything happen. It couldn't be more wrong. That our hearts and our guts are the things that really tell us the wisdom we need to know. You talk to any entrepreneur, and I will bet you $1 bazillion that every key decision they've made has been based on that inner knowing, that little voice that they're listening to. It's not based on what our heads tell us, because our heads tell us the historical story of all the bad things that have happened to us.
Well, that head wants the research and it wants the backup and all the analytics. I'm not interested in that. I'm like, I just know it's going to work. And how do you say that in the world that we've been living in, I guess, up until now? Well, no one's interested.
I struggled, as you know, for a long time, because I've always had an element of the spiritual in my work. It's really
Yes, you have. And actually, this would be a great time for us to tell people who might be interested. One of the books that you've written is called The Good Hustle. And just a brief explanation about how you brought heart-centeredness and soul, I guess, into business in that book.
Oh, you mean this book, Jules?
Yeah, that one. Show me again. I didn't see it.
It happened to be right here.
I could take it off my own bookcase.
The Good Hustle really came about because I'd been working in fast growth startups in tech world for ages. I'd been working in innovation. It's just like sausage fest. And also it's all really driven by that technical sort of stuff. I went away to do a yoga retreat for 2 months in an ashram. And as I was there, I really had this very strong intuitive sense, but also like a light bulb moment of looking and studying some of the ancient texts of yoga and looking at the path to enlightenment as the same as the path of taking an idea out to market. Now, I'd worn a neural pathway in the path to market, a mile deep, because I'd spent so much time working with founders. And I was thinking, it's the same attributes we need to get to that place where we're enlightened. And so if people are already like, enlightened, oh God, one more thing I have to do. Enlightenment isn't out there. Enlightenment is the moment where you feel truly at peace with yourself and feel at one and happy with all that is in the moment. And so that's kind of like, that's a stretch goal and that's a horizon goal. To get there, we have to take little steps constantly. And it's just like taking a product to market. There are all kinds of setbacks on the way. There's all kinds of austerity. There's all kinds of hardship, and there's all kinds of joy. And we can run those things together. So for the people that come to me that really wanted to run purpose-driven for-profit businesses, this isn't about, I'm just going to live a mega humble life with a bowl of lentils. This is about...
No, because, you can't pay your groceries, and also you can't retire on a bowl of lentils and a good intention. We've really... And that's something I would say to all women out there. don't think small. Start thinking big. There's nothing to be ashamed of that you're trying to make a profit or you want to make money. So go on, Polly.
I mean, you raise, as of course, this is like my favourite conversations in the world happen with you, Jules. But
And mine too.
so businesses need to think big. They need to look at their stretch goals. They need to really understand that they have to build in something that they believe in and that's purposeful, but they have to be sustainable, because that's the greatest tragedy. And most of the sadness I've had when I've worked with female founders particularly is that they haven't planned big enough and they haven't cashed themselves up enough to start with, which, you know, of course is because it's really bloody hard to get.
Well, I was going to say, let's also talk about the fact that only 2% of VC funding is going to women. And I was talking with Sam White, who's one of the other interviews last week from the UK, and going, there's only 2% of female funding going to female founders. And she said, try 1% in the UK. So it is everywhere.
Yeah, and look,
you know,
that statistic has been...
We've got to ask for money.
It's been stable for 10 years, Jules. That's the statistic. It's like, oh, we need to get this amount of women on boards. Oh, we don't have that many women on boards, but we really want them to. You know, unless you create an environment where you are able to get resources or you are able to step into the seats of power, we'll never see equity. We'll never see parity. We'll never see women being on boards that get paid. We'll never see women getting funded by the men's networks that fund all.
That's right. We've got to build our women's networks and we've got to get that funding out there. There are plenty of women that want to support other women. It's time to actually act, I think. And, you know, there are small funds starting up more and more over the last couple of years that are focused on female founders, but nowhere near enough. And women, I think the other thing is women have to lean in. They have to ask for stuff because you don't get it if you don't ask for it.
Yeah, that's right. And I think you mentioned the word shame before. I think this is a really interesting thing that women tend to have around money, much more so than men do. And the shame of wanting to ask for something and set a boundary. And I mean, that makes sense because so much of women's lives is about putting others first, nurturing and caring. And I don't want to generalize into a stereotype.
And avoiding rejection. I mean, that's the other thing that we're pretty good at as well. We don't like that. I mean, I'm not saying anyone likes being rejected, but I think with women, we do take it much more personally than maybe even it was intended.
But I also think that these are things that we need to be able to have a non-charged discussion and dialogue about. And, you know, if we're held out of being able to get funding, I'd also argue that's because we aren't making stratospheric wealth as a gender. We're not in that, you know, rich list to the same extent that we see men in there. And there's that rich list looks very much like the same statistics that you see in the media. It's all white, it's all male, and it's all privileged. So this is something that we need to work on. Having said that, though, I think part of the women ascension and part of women really rising up is that we need to work more collectively, and we need to work collectively in an investment sense as well, and we need to be able to pool our wealth and our support to be able to rise others up. And that's actually what women do well. There's a really fabulous group of women who are called zebras. I don't know what's happening with them now.
What are they called? Zebras.
So the zebras came together to say that they can do investment for businesses that aren't just going to have a really sort of unicorn style fantasy make-believe product that then suddenly...
Yeah, 1 in a million kind of success story.
And they basically say that unicorns are just a horse with a dick on their head. Paraphrasing. But zebras are inclusive, and zebras, so the businesses they want to fund are ones that will employ local, that will grow for 20 years, that will distribute wealth to all of the people that get involved in them, and that are generally for purpose, but for profit. So this is a really interesting model. I hope that those women are still going. It was in the US that got started up maybe a year or so ago. It was a really in response to this lack of capacity to get capital, which is the thing that helps you scale, Jules. I mean, you've scaled.
I know.
You know exactly what that's like.
I do, and I know how frustrating it is, but I also have to say, as a female founder myself, and I've had my business for 12 years with a big focus on it in the last 4 or 5 years. And so my first thing that I would say to anyone is having a side hustle never really turns into the big business you want it to be. You have to go and focus on it. But the other thing that I guess was a revelation to me is, and somebody said it to me a couple of years ago, show me $1 million company that one person is running. It just doesn't happen. So you have to get more people in. You have to earn some money so that you can get more people in, and then collectively you will grow it. So the idea of, which I think, well, I don't know, I was going to say is a masculine, but it isn't. That idea of just going really hard on your own and you're going to be the one who runs the company is maybe counterintuitive or the wrong thing to be doing if you really want to grow your business. And I didn't know that for probably the first 10 years that I ran my business.
And also, it's really hard to employ people when you don't have access to capital. And this is where women's businesses are missing out, because when you get from that 1 or 2 people to suddenly 5 or 6, and then you get to 8 and 10, and then you get to 20, and then you get to 60, and then. That's what the model looks like for a scalable, investable, exitable business, certainly in the tech world. But the other thing too, Jules, it's like we talk about diversity in all things. You don't make great decisions on your own. You're much better off when you've got people who challenge you, who will bring a different viewpoint, which is why I'm bang on about values-based businesses and aligned businesses so much, because if you get a group of people together that are really clear on their values, that are really clear on that point that they're reaching for, then you can have some dynamic, productive discussion that will get really good outcomes for the customer, for the person you're in service to. And that's, I guess, my other thing that, we create businesses, I think, as women that where we're in service to people. We're not doing...
We want to help people, yeah.
We don't want to have like $1 billion and a Ferrari. That might be a side, but it's not the main aim. The main aim isn't ego. The main aim is having a problem that we've seen that we know will help others if we solve it. That's the best model ever.
And actually, just while we're talking about this is another little insight of mine. I don't know whether it's been true to you as well, but I think part of the breaking down is we don't need all that superficial shit that's been so important to people for so long. Who cares what your handbag is? Who cares what brand of clothing or how many diamonds you've got on? I think that it's much more important now that we talk about what's between your ears, what's coming out of your mouth, and as you say, what's in your heart. And that is what people will judge you on. So you are not going to, I believe anyway, that we are moving away from a situation where, where a family like the Kardashians can be worth billions of dollars for sort of facile, kind of superficial stuff, and that it's much more interesting and important to have an opinion, to have a brain, to have, insights into things.
I totally agree, and I think that we've been sort of duped for a long time about what it is to be a woman and what it is to be a woman who can stand in her power. And that has always been about an aesthetic. It hasn't been about celebrating heart, celebrating mind. It's always been about, oh, what are you wearing? Oh, look at the shape of your body. We see this in politics. And I mean, all of these things are connected, Jules. We can't live in a world where we have no women in business, no women in politics, no women in any of the structures that control power and money. And right now we're so underrepresented. And what we see are lots of women who don't feel like they're enough. Lots of women who really struggle to get there because the glass ceiling is real, no matter how much we try to talk about how we're post-feminist. We're not, because we're still seeing those structures in place. And we're not seeing men reach out and say, oh, hey, here's some money. And we're also not seeing the volume of domestic violence go down. And these things are all correlated. So when you have women who are largely the victims of domestic violence, who are largely held out of power, money, structures, having a voice in the media, all of these things silence us and subjugate us. And this is something that we really need to look at. And I'm not, suggesting in any way that men are bad or, we should...
Yes, I think it's important. I think it... Go on, you go, and then I'll say as well.
Not a caveat either. Like, I can say with a completely open heart, I really love men and I love a lot of men individually, but I can also say that the power structures are real and we can measure them and we can see them. And as women, we can't dismantle them. We can't dismantle something we didn't make. So we need men to be saying, hey, you know what? I'm not going to tolerate this. And if I have one more man go, oh, but, we put it on the application form.
I know.
It's like, you know what? Just employ women. Just employ Indigenous people. Make it your mission to get parity. Make it your mission. And then we're going to start seeing a real shift. But it has to come from the people who have to ask themselves the question, what is it to give up power?
It's interesting you say that, because I have a different attitude, which is that I think we allow what's been going on there on the left-hand side, which is with, the patriarchy and everything, to sort of implode as it possibly will over time. But I think rather than trying to do baby steps, rather than trying to fix things that are there, I just want us to start again. And I want to go, you know what? I don't need to be in your media outlet. I'm going to start my own. I don't need to be in your large business that's all about money. I'm going to start my own, and it's going to be about helping people or whatever. But I feel really, really strongly that now is the time for women in particular, and because I'm one of them, and I know there's a lot of ageism out there, but to say, stuff it, we actually don't need to change that, we just need to build a new one. And that way it'll all come together in the mix. But I also wanted to say I very clearly love men, think they're great, and I feel that actually those ones that are in power are in the minority, that most people out there know that their fathers and their brothers and their friends, all those guys support us. They want to see the change as well, but they don't know how to help us. And so it's for us to actually say, this is what we're going to do, and this is how you can help us.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. But I'm also sad that we always feel the need to have to justify and go, oh, but we really love men, because the reality is that the minute you start talking about women needing to have just equality, nothing more.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
Like, oh, you're a man hater. And it's like, oh, for God's sake, like,
I know.
we just all care for each other. And if we take it out of the binary, male, female, good, bad, all that stuff, if we're just humans,
That's very
true. Why can't we all be humans together? Why can't we all be having a human experience? Why can't we all be caring for each other and rising together, and no one gets left behind, and no one gets, anything happening to them, because we have a heart and we're working from there. But I totally agree with you, Jules, about asking for what we need, and we have to get really good at doing that. And we need to, as you say, think big. That's a big message for women to understand. That you don't just do the small thing because that's, oh, I couldn't do more than that. It's like, actually, you know what? You could do a lot.
Absolutely, you could. And the other really, really important thing to me is that we lift up the other women alongside us. So this is not corporate kind of, and I hardly even have worked in corporate myself, but I hear it all the time of the women that are sort of, having to climb on the corpses almost of the other people in order to get higher in business. That is not the intention. I don't think that is needed in any way. We need to collaborate, we need to support, we need to lift up the people that are getting left behind, and that way we'll all grow together, and it'll make it a much bigger and better world for us all to live in and work in and run our businesses in.
But you've also got to think, that always makes me sad when I say the sisterhood punching on. But the reality is that people behave in that way because they're frightened, and because they feel alone, and because they feel that they have no one there to support them. So I don't see you as my sister, I see you as my rival, and there's only enough for one of us.
But it's perpetuated in large organisations. They're made to compete with each other. It's awful.
We're made to believe as women in scarcity all the time, that we aren't ever enough. And, that is, to me, that's the key thing that I see over and over and over in the courses that we run, in the leadership stuff. It's always the fundamentals core of the problem. It's never about the person's capacity to lead. It's that they believe they're not enough. And that manifests in all kinds of behaviours. And when you get to that, and that sits in shame as well, when you can open that and you can hold it and you can understand where that comes from and fix it, then you are able to stand in your grounded confidence. And you know that if you succeed, I succeed, and every one of us succeed.
Absolutely. Now, let's go on to the book that you're writing at the moment. You mentioned just before we came on air that you are in the process of writing a book. I think you said the title is Awake. So tell me all about that. What are you up to?
Zoe and I are writing a book together, which is, both of us are writers, and we, clearly we spend a lot of time together, and we spend a lot of time discussing what's going on in the world. And
well, you're both bloody brilliant, if I might say. So, this is going to be a magical combination of you two writing this book together.
It is. It feels really magical, and it's interesting. Both of us had a weekend where we were, in different states, and we both had this moment of having an awareness.
I just got that. Sorry, in different states. Go on.
We both had like a full awareness that we had to write a book together. And Zoe came back, and I came back from wherever we were, and it's like, I have this thing where I had to write a book. And I'm like, yeah, me too. What's it called? It's called Awake. And it was like we just both got the download. So.
All the goosebumps again.
Yeah, and look, we decided we wanted to write this book, which is basically about the process of waking up. What is it to be awake, and not in that sort of hipster, I'm really woke kind of way.
So what is it? I mean, what kind of awake are you talking about?
It's really talking about that capacity to see the world in a bigger sense, see the world in its largeness, in its infinity, not see the world in the smallness of what's I, me, and mine. So how do we actually get to that place where we are generous and we're open and we are experiencing the full glory of our lives, the full joy of our lives? And so we spend a lot of time talking to people about this. So what we've done is just really pull out the top 20 topics that we talk about. And it's things like sex and death and joy and aging and vulnerability and shame and all the stuff that is a little bit kind of, oh. And we've titled the book as a dialogue. So
juicy, I would say.
It's very juicy in parts. We're talking about ourselves. We're not, we're talking about the theory, we're talking about what we see and hear, and then we're talking about ourselves. So, we always say that we do the work and we are the work, and we never stand in front of a room and go, oh, look at us, so leaderful. It's like we're just as big a messes as you are, and we're just standing here to witness you while you work your own shit out, and we're working ours out at the same time. So the book's kind of like that on paper. It's kind of like our series that we do. We've got our little pilot light TV series Unpacked. It's like that. We're really just rumbling around going, well, what is this life? How do we make it more meaningful? How do we get more connected? So the theme of the book is connection, and it's about having conversations around how we connect through being awake and through opening our eyes to what it is we can really do if we let go of the things that keep us small.
Okay, so now I know that that you did spend some time with Brene Brown last year or the year before, but pre-COVID anyway. One of the things, and look, I'm not a huge understander of everything she's done. I bet there are probably the whole audience has except me. But this sort of vulnerability and what's a dare to lead kind of thing. Tell me a little bit about that in terms of how that is panning out into the bigger world and into business.
Look, we all owe Brene a debt of gratitude for opening a global conversation on shame and a global conversation on vulnerability. And that's very much, she's classically set out to do that thing where she just wanted to write a research paper, then she just wanted to write a book, and then she just did a TED Talk, and from that,
and then it was the TED Talk that made it all take off, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. But I mean, she didn't just go, okay, no, I'm going back into my university office. She really took that and she did things she's never done before. She started what is now a massive corporation. She's got a global leadership program. She's a New York Times bestseller. So she started small, but when the opportunity presented, she ran with it.
She jumped on it. Yeah.
Her stuff on vulnerability was really important because basically it invited us to look at the power of vulnerability, and that unless we really truly were able to be vulnerable, we weren't able to be courageous. And part of her work was to break down these myths of vulnerability. And they're things like vulnerability is weakness, or our favorite, I can go it alone. That's my personal favorite. I can go it alone. I don't need any help. When I've got it right, I'll show it to you, So yeah. Vulnerability, the distillation of it is that vulnerability is a team sport, but vulnerability has to work with courage. You can never do anything that's truly audacious or courageous, particularly in business, without being vulnerable, because you're going to fail.
Absolutely. I mean, it's what makes you scared that makes you go forward, I guess, and makes you learn.
Or paralyzes you. And so
or paralyzes you, of course.
But that's the thing. We want people to be able to go, I know I'm going to have a stack at some point, and then I'm going to be able to get back up. So her work is very much, you've got vulnerability and shame, but you've also got resilience, and you've got the capacity to rise and know how to do that in a way that allows you to bounce back, that you've acknowledged all your emotions. You're not just like blocking everything down. So her work, and now our work, very much is around this idea of being able to recognize emotion and how it works.
Okay, so that then plays in beautifully to what we've been talking about the rise of the feminine, about women taking charge a little bit more, because we are the ones who do show vulnerability, I think, in general. I mean, a lot of women possibly don't take the next step, as you say, they get frozen by it. But if you go into, I mean, a classic one is going into the mums groups. Now, they've been around for, I think I started working in that sort of parenting space when the mumpreneur stuff, let's say online, it happened in the early 2000s. One of the key things that it came out of that was women going, I'm not perfect. It was almost the first time that we had seen people say, and in that mum space, women are very comfortable with it now, going, listen, I haven't had a shower for 2 days, my hair's everywhere, I feel terrible, or I can't fit into my clothes, or I feel like killing my child sometimes because I don't mean that literally, but, you know, like they're just annoying me so much. And then I think that's being then played out into the bigger sort of society, that it's become, okay, well, if I'm okay saying it in a group of women and they don't all bite my head off, maybe I could go a little bit further and start telling other people how I feel. Do you think that's had any impact on it?
I think that, and like you, I did a lot of work with mumpreneurs. That's where I really started working with
Yeah, same. I think that's when we first met.
Yeah, totally. And so I think that we are better at being vulnerable, but I think also we have better language around it now because it's more popularized. And Brene's work was really very much not talking to women. It was much more talking to men about in leadership, about how they needed to be vulnerable and start mirroring that behavior. But what that does for us is vulnerability is what we need when we ask for help, Jules. So if we say to women, okay, we need you guys to go out and we need you to ask for money, ask for resources, ask for mentors, that's being vulnerable, because every time we do something that puts ourselves out on a limb, we're risking someone saying no or breaking our heart, or, you know, but the biggest joys in life require immense courage to love someone, to have a child, all of those things where that could be taken away from you at any time, but you are courageous enough to stand in your confidence and say it's going to be worth it. And when that happens, I've got resilience and I can deal with my business failing, or I can deal with a big setback. So it's an important conversation to have, but really the main thing to understand is that there's a suite of things that go with that. Vulnerability is one of them, resilience is another, and unpacking and putting some light on shame, because shame is one of the most difficult emotions. We all carry it. It's universal, male, female, you name it.
Yep. Probably even the dog when it's ripped something up and it looks at you like that.
And I was thinking, now my dog's got zero shame. He doesn't know how to be ashamed. But it's a universal connector, and the antidote to shame is empathy. So when we work with all of those emotions and we know how to use them and we build the muscles, you can't just do it in your head. This has to happen in the bones. When we do that, we can really start to shift on and transform our relationships and how we do business and how strong we feel. You know, because no one can push us over. When we're standing there, we're just who we are. We aren't hiding behind our armor. We aren't hiding behind our stuff. We're just there. Here it is. Here I am. I'm ready. Bring it on. And I'll take what comes.
Yeah, look, I love talking to you, Polly. You just are so smart, and everything that comes out of your mouth, I feel like you're the oracle. Thank you for this amazing conversation. One of the things that we were going to touch on was agility and how to come out of this chaos with agility. Do you want to talk about that a little bit more, or do you think we've covered that off?
I really connect agility to resilience. And I think people think resilience is about being really strong and really kind of like, oh, I'm just going to get through this.
Like a rhinoceros, I'm just going to keep ploughing through with my thick armour.
Yeah, totally, Jules. That's such a beautiful analogy. But if we think about what resilience actually is, it's the capacity to bounce back. And you can't bounce back when you're a rhino. You need to be flexible. So
you need to be Tigger.
Or Piglet. But you need to have that capacity to move fast and to literally bend and come back and be in good shape. I was making this I was having this discussion with someone about resilience yesterday, and the piece is that when you're big and solid and can't move very fast, you're very inflexible. You cannot survive in this world now. And we're talking about post-COVID, but really, I feel like this world's been changing sort of rapidly for the last couple of years.
Yeah, I do too. I agree.
Okay, next. And I'm okay with that. I'm not clinging on to, but I wanted it to be this way. It's like, no. Whatever you thought might happen, that's a story you're telling yourself. What's actually happening in front of you, that's what we need to address. And that's what agility is, and that makes you resilient, because you can't be resilient when you are stuck and when you can only do things in one way. So they go hand in hand, and it's really important that resilient people are the ones who are going to best bounce out of COVID and out of all the situations and be like, okay, what's next? You know?
Yeah. But hopefully they're going to bring the other people with them. I guess that's what I'd like to see come out of this.
Yeah, me too.
those of us that can bounce, that are able to be agile, and that are going to, and there are a lot of companies benefiting out of this COVID situation, as well as the devastation that's happening amongst small businesses, and particularly in retail and travel. But let's, bring everyone up. It's just my big thing is, there's no point having a massive, enormous business if you're going to be squashing people down. That's not going to work, I don't think, anymore.
No, and that's not in the spirit of working from the heart center and working in heart energy. And
No.
when we're working like that, we bring everyone with us, and it's not a crime to not be as resilient as someone else. It's something to be aware of, so you can make sure that person is cared for. And that's the kind of world we want to live in. Like, why wouldn't we want that for all of our people, to be there with our arms open saying, let's do this together? I just think that's what it is to be awake. It's what it is.
I love it. Polly, I just have to put my arms out now to give you a big virtual hug. Thank you so much for this interview today. God, I love chatting with you. If anybody wanted to get hold of you, what is the best way? And the other thing is, when is your book going to come out? But start with that. What's the best way to get hold of you?
I'm all over the internet. So you can find me at Polly McGee everywhere. On my website, pollymcgee.com. Pilotlight.co is where you'll find Zoe and I at home plotting our leadership ascension. LinkedIn, link in with me. And when you link in with me, let me know that you saw me on She's the Boss, because I want to make sure that I know that you're one of Jules's people.
Thank you.
And the book hopefully will come out next year. We're writing it now, so we're aiming for a 2021 launch of that. And I'm sure She's the Boss girls will be right in on getting the first copies.
Absolutely. Might have to promote that all over the place. I mean, something like that is just so important, particularly for women who are successful founders, to kind of be able to move forward as we're going. Sorry, that sounded a bit waffly, but you know what I meant, I think.
It's an inside job. You fix that bit and the world is literally going to be your oyster.
Fantastic. So look, thank you all for watching today. I hope you've really enjoyed this show. As you can tell, I have. She's the Boss has got Zoom lunches that I do every Friday for female founders. We also have She's the Boss Chats podcast featuring the fabulous Polly McGee, much more about her journey from high school basically to being the awesome woman that she is today. And I also have a website at she'stheboss.com.au. If you're on YouTube, please subscribe. We really need more subscribers so that we can really grow this channel. And if you click on the little bell at the top for notifications, then you'll get told each time we have a new show out, which is pretty much every day of the week. Thank you for joining me.